and summary of the Allergy Summit. I'm really pleased that you're going to be joining me for this session that's going to last, maybe an hour, something like that, depending on how many questions we get and the detail that we dive into, and maybe some of the tangents that we go into as well. So just while everyone is jumping on to the stream, I'd like to introduce myself. This is day one after all, and it may be that you haven't watched my kind of introductory video or you haven't come across my work before. So I'm veterinarian Dr. Alex. I'm a general practitioner, originally from the UK, living and working in New Zealand now. I'm also founder of ourpetshealth.com and have a YouTube channel, Our Pets Health, have a podcast called The Vet Show. Really, I want to help people explore all of the different options of care for their pets, no matter what life throws their way. So that's in honest, hopefully avoiding the most common injuries and illnesses that I see every day in the vet clinic, because so many of them are completely avoidable. Or if not completely avoidable, we can greatly reduce their risk, but also help explore all of the different options and also look at the evidence and further evidence behind some of the claims that people make, maybe whether some treatments really work, how well they work, all the different options are as well. So that's kind of a little bit about me. For our allergy summit, allergies are so common. It's expected that about 20% of pets are going to be suffering from some form of allergic disease in their life. So it's something that is incredibly common. And I see firsthand just the misery that this causes. So we think of allergies as we think of it. We can think of it as just a little bit of minor itching, but it can cause so much more than that. It causes, we need to really switch our thinking from a little bit of an itch and a minor problem to one that is actually very akin to being painful. So I think we will often have experiences in our own life being painful for a period of time or being itchy for a period of time. Certainly something that I'm suffering at times. And if you're being woken up every single night, if you're not getting rest, if it's just this background irritation, you get grumpy, you get miserable, you get tired, and it's exactly the same for our dogs. So it's a really common problem. It's something that there are thankfully lots of different options available to us to manage this, to treat it, and to even cure it in some cases. And clearly we're going to be jumping into a lot of those over the course of the next 4 days. The big kind of focus for day one was really twofold. One was the importance of reaching that accurate diagnosis, because allergies are not the only reason that dogs itch. And for those dogs that do suffer from allergies, that maybe have previously been well controlled, or they've not been well controlled and their disease and that itch is progressing, is that we can get secondary complications as a result of those allergies. And it's important that we diagnose those as well. And so that was one of the big focuses, and there's lots of different ways that we can reach that allergy diagnosis. And in some dogs, it's going to be relatively straightforward. In others, it can actually be a little bit of a process and a potentially frustrating process to discover that allergies are the only thing that's going on, or to find out that there are all of these other issues that may be complicating that. There's also a number of pitfalls you can talk about, and whether there's any questions about the diagnosis. Certainly home testing is a big problem area, if you like. And that was something that Dr. Jennifer spoke about. Dr. Jeff, I believe we spoke about that as well. But certainly if you've got any questions about that. I'd love to hear where you're from now. And as you have questions, just write them in the chat, whichever platform you're listening and watching this on, and the question will be flashed up on the screen for me to see. So that's the way that I'm going to see your questions there. So yeah, get them written down in the chat. We also spoke about a lot about the pharmaceutical medications. Now I know for a lot of you, that's not what you want to hear. We want to be avoiding our pharmaceuticals wherever possible, and I absolutely hear you. And I absolutely agree that we shouldn't be relying on these wherever possible as the sole means of treatment. And ideally, we won't be needing them at all in the long term. But the reality of the situation is that if we recognize the impact that allergies are having, that itch is having on our pet, then certainly for those that are struggling in a more major way, actually pharmaceuticals offer the best short-term relief of itch, improvement in comfort and resetting of the skin. So you know, I am a strong believer in using all of the tools in our arsenal, and if that means that we need to use these treatment modalities with a very specific end goal in mind. So that's the other thing. We need to know what is our end goal. We're not relying on them 100%, but a lot of the other strategies that we're going to think about over the next 3 days. So that's diet, that's herbs, that's supplements, that's topical therapies, that's grooming, all of these other treatment modalities that we're going to be diving into. And there's two things that often takes some time to kick in. And if we're waiting for them to kick in, then in that time that it's taking, our pets are miserable, they're still struggling. And from my point of view, I want to instant relief wherever possible. And certainly if it was me that was struggling with this, I would want to get instant relief while all of these other changes in the lifestyle, you know, decontamination and all of that kind of good stuff was taking effect, because we've got some inherent problems with our allergic dogs as well. Now, some is going to be just because of what's going on in their environment, that they're being given, all that kind of thing. But others, there is a genetic, there's a genetic component to their disease, and some of them are very strong genetic components. So the West Highland White Terrier, for example, is a real classic. That their skin is inherently flawed, if you like, that leaves them open to developing allergic disease, and it takes a lot of time. That can be 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, sometimes even 12 weeks for everything to be correct, to improve their skin. And in that time, we want them to be as comfortable as possible. So, you know, there's that, you know, that aspect of things. So Dr. Jeff spoke fantastically about all of the different drug options that there are. There's a lot of confusion, I think, about what the use of each of them is. Why would we use one over the other? You know, alcohol, cytopoint, steroids, you know, which do have a role to play, although thankfully we are using them less and less. Certainly our reliance on them is much less in providing that instant relief. He also touched on antihistamines and the benefit that they could potentially bring. So definitely encourage you to dive into that. Dr. Jennifer Duffield, so we spoke more about some of the topical aspects, and we dive deep into that in some of my other guests over the next few days as well. We also spoke about parasites. The parasites, depending on where you are in the world, is going to depend on what parasites your dog is going to be exposed to. And so, you know, that I guess the recommendations are going to be different depending on you know, where you are. Now, with parasites, there are a couple of different key issues with them. I guess we're talking about fleas in particular, but other biting kind of insects as well, in that they cause two problems with allergic dogs. So the first is those dogs that do have a true flea allergy. The thing with the flea allergy is that they're allergic to actually the saliva of the flea itself. So it doesn't take many fleas to cause a really severe problem, and you get a flare up of the disease and ulceration and misery and secondary infections and all that kind of thing. So we don't want to be waiting for an infestation before we are taking action. We want the action that we're using to be incredibly highly effective, because otherwise we're going to be putting out fires all the time and dealing with constant flare-ups and, again, risk of that secondary infection. And then we've got those individuals that don't have a true flea allergy. Well, apparently I'm kind of freezing, so hopefully that will come and go. Yeah, from my end, I've checked my internet connection and it looks pretty good. So hopefully that excuse me, hopefully that's not to be something that is a common problem. So yeah, hopefully bear with us, and hopefully that will improve. So what are your thoughts on so FMT, so fecal microbiome transfer. That's what you mean, William. So actually, I think it is something that is the microbiome is incredibly important. Sorry, just see me scrolling. I'm looking on my other page. So I've got a fantastic conversation. That is, I'm just looking when that is going to be. That is going to be on day 4, I believe, with Dr. Margot Roman, and we dive deep into the microbiome and microbiome restorative therapy, so FMD. Sorry, I have to excuse my croaky voice. It's I've kind of been a bit of a cold and flew long haul a few days ago that really dries your throat. So excuse the croakiness of my voice. So I think the microbiome is incredibly important. It's something that is it's becoming more and more well understood, the importance of it. So we know that the gut is hugely important for the immune function of our dogs, of our cats, of ourselves. The microbiome is incredibly important with optimizing gut health and optimizing whole body health. So I know you've heard in previous, it's all about the importance of diet and the microbiome, and absolutely allergic disease. There seems to be a huge benefit with having a healthy gut. We have got evidence that with certain probiotics, so microbiome is a hugely complicated area. So it's not just a case of 1 or 2 microbes of bugs in the gut having a big effect. It's that whole population, that whole resident population. But we know that even with the supplementation of certain probiotics, and again, this is something that I actually dive into on day 4 as well. So if you're interested in the microbiome and probiotics and things and other supplements, day 4 is definitely for you. But what allergic disease is essentially a problem with the body's immune system. It's not responding appropriately as it should be. And so if we can optimize the health of the immune system, and the gut health and the microbiome absolutely is part of that, then we can go a long way to controlling and potentially even eliminating the allergic response. Now, does that mean that that's all we need to concentrate on? No, I don't think it is. But for many dogs, if we are feeding them appropriately, if we're addressing this micro population in their intestines, then we go a long way to controlling things. Now, one thing that we need to be aware of, I guess, is that secondary infections are really common in our dogs with allergic skin disease. We are moving away from oral antibiotic therapy to treat that wherever possible. Now, in some dogs, that's not going to be the case, and absolutely oral antibiotics are what they are going to need. But in many, many, many cases, we can get away without oral antibiotics. But for those dogs that have antibiotics for their skin infections or for any other illness and injury or whatever other reason that they may have had in their life, we also know that those antibiotics, they have an effect that is incredibly long lasting on the microbiome, on that normal microbe flora. And it lasts a lot longer than just that course of antibiotics. So we need to be mindful of that. And I think with any individual that is receiving antibiotics, then probiotics is a good idea. Now, when it comes to fecal microbiome transfer, I guess the problem is that we don't know what the ideal microbiome is supposed to be. We also can't assume that just one dog's poop who hasn't got allergies and who hasn't been on antibiotics is the ideal poop to use for that fecal microbiome transfer. So there's a lot of unknowns, and it's an incredibly exciting field, and definitely watch this space. But like I say, with Dr. Margot Roman, dive deeper into this. She's got she herself has got a population of animals that are being studied, and that she uses for this, and it's incredibly exciting. I've seen in kind of news reports, thinking kind of ahead to the future, that it may be kind of time where each individual person can be assessed for what their ideal microbiome should be, and steps can be made to ensure that is the case. So watch this space. I think it's an incredibly exciting potential treatment modality that can have a huge benefit to our dogs in general, but our allergic dogs in particular, because if we can optimize that, we go a long way to helping the immune system function effectively as it should be without this overreaction, which is what allergic diseases are. Cool. So great question. Thanks for that. So the final I'll tell you, my dog just got blood test back and he's allergic to grass, trees and plants. He has a food intolerance to it on a hydrolyzed diet. Are the allergies related? Excuse me. So are these allergies related? So they're related, I guess, in the sense that we're dealing with we're dealing with an immune system that isn't recognizing normal substances properly and is actually flagging them as foreign. So from that point of view, they're all part and parcel of the same disease, and it is incredibly common. So I should say it's very uncommon for a dog to be allergic to a single thing. So very often we have to see with environmental allergies, so those the trees, the grasses, house dust mites is incredibly common. Storage mites in food, which is something we could be avoiding potentially, is incredibly common. It's incredibly common for a dog to be allergic to lots of different things, and the challenge here comes with actually eliminating these from the environment. Now, clearly with our environments, like so with the trees and the grasses, unless you're moving to a substantially different environment, then it can be very, very difficult to, or really impossible to eliminate them from the environment. However, we can take steps to eliminate some of the other ones. So it'd be interesting to see, what that report was with that blood test. Is there a dust mite allergy? Is there a storage mite allergy? Is there a flea sensitivity? And really diving deep into that to see which, how we can make the environment as clean, in inverted commas, as possible, so that your dog, isn't getting the stimulation. When it comes to food allergies, I think it's not uncommon for a dog to have allergies to their food as well as to their environment. With food allergies, they do tend to be much more specific. So we will often have an allergy that we can potentially isolate to a single substance, rather than being an allergy to multiple different foodstuffs. Now, I'd be interested to know how that food allergy was diagnosed. So something that we touched on at the very introduction is that actually the diagnosis is an accurate, reliable diagnosis is incredibly important. And with food allergies, unfortunately, the at-home tests are really not reliable at all, and I would absolutely not recommend them. And I say that because there's been numerous studies where people have sent off. So there's a couple of different tests that we can run. Some are on saliva. So you take a swab of your dog's mouth and you send that off. Others are of the hair. So you take a sample of hair and you send that off. And there have been studies where people have taken absolutely no sign of allergic disease, but no sign of food allergies. They are, for all intents and purposes, 100% healthy. Their saliva has been sent away, has been checked into the food allergy tests, and all of them came back as allergic to at least one food substance. And I think it was something like 70 or 80% came back allergic to multiple food substances. So that, in my mind, says that they are they're really not reliable, and that they are, over-diagnosing it if there's any value in them at all. But certainly all of these healthy dogs came back suffering from food allergy, even though there was no sign of that at all in their general health and their life. The other thing that's been sent today is kind of polyester fibers from stuffed toys, again, hair from dogs who didn't suffer from any allergies, and they came back to suffer from allergic disease, and that food allergies, and also environmental allergies as well. So saliva and hair samples are not reliable and accurate for that. When it comes to food allergies, like blood testing is also not reliable at all. That has been shown again that the food allergy cannot be diagnosed by blood testing. We get a lot of false positives and false negatives, meaning that those that are false positives means that this is flagging that as a positive response, so that the dog is allergic to that particular substance, even when they're not. And a false negative is when a test says that in this case the dog is not allergic to that substance when they actually are. Blood test results, though, are very useful for our environmental allergies. So that's where that blood panel that comes back with trees and grasses and that kind of good stuff, is reliable. Maybe the gold standard for our allergic, our atopic disease, our environmental allergies is the scratch test. You might have heard of that, or an intradermal skin test, and that is typically carried out by a dermatologist, by a specialist. It's something that, as I think, it's done less and less now that we do have good and accurate blood tests that are very simple to do, that can don't require sedation, they don't require travel to a specialist, but it's something that may be appropriate for your dog if you're really struggling to get to the bottom of what the problem is. With food allergies, sorry, kind of going off on a tangent there, but with food allergies, the way to diagnose that is to run something called a diet trial. And this is the feeding of a novel protein and a novel carbohydrate source to a dog for a period of 6 to 12 weeks. Now, I say that there's that big range because different dogs are going to respond differently. But what I mean by a novel protein and a novel carbohydrate is a protein source, so a meat, if we think of that as the main protein source, which is going to be the case for the majority of our dogs, or a carbohydrate, so a carbohydrate that they've not come across before. So that's the potato or something like that. And we feed that and nothing but that while we're conducting a diet trial. So this is really important. So no treats, no table scraps, even just kind of shuffling through the grass, picking up some dropped food can ruin all of the good work that you do with it. So there is a definite challenge here. To run one of these successfully, there's a couple of things that we need to think about. We need to have a really good diet history. So it's really important that you are thinking back and analyzing all of the things that your dog has eaten and is eating, so that you can identify maybe what they haven't come across in their lifetime, so that you can identify this novel protein and this novel carbohydrate. That can be quite challenging. So we can choose diet that doesn't have those ingredients, and that's really going to depend on what you've fed your dog in the past. Sometimes that's going to be incredibly difficult. Equally, if you've fed them a very specific diet and that's all that they've ever eaten, then it becomes a little bit easier. We've then got our hydrolyzed diets, and I know many of you are going to not be so keen on those hydrolyzed diets. I think we need to think of them as them as a diagnostic test. So what a hydrolyzed diet is it takes a protein molecule and it basically chops that into lots of little bits that the body's immune system is not going to recognize. Does the same with the carbohydrates as well. And so it's a way of kind of getting around the difficulty of actually identifying what a dog has eaten in the past, what they're currently eating, and finding something that they've never come across before, which, as you can appreciate, is incredibly challenging, like I've said. So this is where the hydrolyzed diet comes in. Now, the length of time to feed that for is 6 to 12 weeks. After 6 weeks, you hope to see an improvement in their level of itchiness. Equally, if they're really itchy, it may be that they are on other treatment to improve their comfort, which is what I've discussed at the very beginning of this conversation. But at the 6-week period, it might be that we kind of withdraw that other treatment to see what the result is, and we should have a significant reduction in itch. Or in all likelihood, by that 6 to 8 weeks, we should have a significant reduction. It may not be a complete elimination, cessation of itch and a resolution of that signs, but we should be seeing some really good progress. By 12 weeks, if we're on an appropriate diet, and that's the first big challenge, but if we're on an appropriate diet by 12 weeks, if we are dealing with a food allergy and a food allergy alone, then we should have a cessation of our symptoms. Now, the complication, I guess, with food allergies is that a lot of people will, will change a diet. Maybe it might be a home cooked diet. They'll change to a different brand of food. They'll change, whatever that change is, and there'll be a resolution of the allergies, and we think of that as a food allergy. Well, it's not always the case, because actually, food, as we spoke about with the microbiome, can be a powerful medicine for general allergies as well. But I guess in a way that's academic, because if we're finding a problem, it's resolved, then with diet, then fantastic. And if that's curing the problem, then fantastic. You can think of it, it becomes a little bit academic what that allergy was to originally. Sorry, there was a question that just came up on screen. I didn't see that. If we could get that up on, there we go. What's the best way to deal with a hairless breed with skin issues, no ear issues? So Dana, that's really going to depend on what the manifestation of the problem is and what the allergy is too. I think being hairless doesn't really change how all the different strategies that we're going to use to try and get on top of your dog's allergies. So once we've confirmed that allergies are the case, maybe we've run a diet trial, depending on the history, we're going to manage them in the same way. So we're going to be looking at kind of all of the strategies that we're going to be talking about over the next few days. So we're going to be talking about diets. We're going to be thinking about supplements. So omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acid supplements. We're going to be looking at kind of topical therapies. So I guess when we think of grooming our dogs, if you like, and shampooing our dogs, we're maybe thinking of that as because of their hair coat. Actually, a lot of what we're doing certainly with the better shampoos is they have been shown to actually hydrate the skin as well as just rinse the skin. So let me go back a step, and again, this is going to be discussed in other conversations. And I think tomorrow actually we're talking about. Let me just check. No, maybe not tomorrow. Yeah, tomorrow we're talking to Dr. Lisa Chimes about the best way to groom your dog, and Dr. Charisse Roth, we're talking about non-antibiotic control of skin infections. So they're all topical. But when we think about grooming and shampooing our dogs, there's a couple of big benefits that has. The first is that it actually rinses away all of the allergens, the chemicals, the substances that are causing that irritation. It stops them being trapped right next to the skin, which are then causing that constant firing, that constant low-level stimulation for your dog. Now, clearly, if your dog's hairless, then fantastic. They're not going to be gathering the allergens to quite such a degree, although things can still sit on their skin and kind of cause that constant issue. So that's one benefit of our topical therapies. Our grooming, that kind of thing. Other benefit though is that for some of our shampoos, and again we dive deeper into kind of the specifics of that, they actually have a positive effect at soothing inflammation, so reducing inflammation, taking away that irritation, having a calming, kind of an instant calming effect on the skin, stopping that itch, which again I go back to being so important. I think at all points in time we need to be focusing on, in the first instance for an itchy dog, getting rid of that itch, because it causes them to be miserable. It's like being in pain, and we need to be laser focused on getting rid of that itch as soon as possible. But it also has a bigger effect, and has been shown to help with hydration of the skin. So we know, and going back to there being inherent flaws, if you like, in the skin of allergic dogs, we know that a lot of dogs with skin allergies will have a skin that is not as hydrated as non-allergic dogs' skin. And so if we can improve the hydration, we go a long way to fixing the health of that skin, optimizing its health, allowing it to act as a really effective barrier to the outside world, stopping that constant stimulation. And so grooming absolutely is still a great thing to do with a hairless dog. And then our other supplements, so CBD, our herbal supplements, our probiotics, all of the different options in realm of things is going to be absolutely the same with a hairless dog. So yeah, hopefully that answers that question. Excuse me, just have a little drink. Fantastic. So yeah, if there's any more questions, definitely keep them coming. And I'd love to hear your questions and thoughts there. I think ahead to tomorrow then. While I'm waiting for any more questions. So I'm going to introduce you to Susan Bora, although many of you who have been to previous summits will have come across her in the past as well. So I'm talking to her about the approach to allergies with food therapy. So she is actually a founder of Chai Dog, who are a kind of a food company that and we explore the benefits of different foods and kind of home cooked foods and low cooked foods, raw diets potentially there as well. So that's Dr. Susan Bora. She has a really good view on the use of foods, how maybe we don't want to be reliant on these prescription diets, some of the potential challenges we see with those. With that in mind, I've also got a fascinating conversation, and I'd encourage everyone to watch this one with Dr. John Tegstes about hidden hazards and toxins in food that we feed our dogs. So when we think of some hidden hazards and toxins, a lot of us will think of our kibble diets. With that, there's definitely some that we absolutely need to be aware of that can cause big problems with our dog's health in general and with our allergic dogs in particular. But he also talks about the hidden hazards and toxins in all different manner of foods. Now, some of that is going to be, I think, is going to be quite challenging to a lot of us, and it was a big surprise to me in some ways about some of these toxins that are present, no matter what dietary option that we choose to feed our dogs. So definitely check out that conversation to John. I'd like to introduce you tomorrow to Dr. Chris Besant as well. So I think Dr. Chris Besant has been a speaker on previous summits as well, and she's giving a presentation all about herbs, supplements, and foods for allergic dogs. So diving deeper into the food options, but also the herbal option and the other supplement options that we can give to help keep our keep our dogs' allergies under control, and keep that itch away once we've got it nicely controlled. And then also talking with Dr. Lisa Chimes, we'll come back to that. So, Keir, my dog is allergic to flea bites. Is there anything I can use to help with the itching inflammation? Yes, absolutely. So, I think we can still do all of the, I'm going to go back. So, so we've got that allergy to flea bites, and it's great, Kim, that you've been able to identify that is the problem. So the first thing that we need to be doing is, wherever possible, and this can be incredibly challenging, we need to eliminate the risk of, eliminate those flea bites in the first instance. But the reason that can be so challenging is because it only takes, in some dogs, it only takes a single flea bite to set that inflammation off, and cause all kinds of problems with secondary infections and all of those other things that we've already spoken about. So I think we need to be focusing on all of the on general health and a healthy immune system. So I think if we are focusing on gut health, if we're focusing on diet, so this goes back again to dietary management, not just being for dietary allergies. Giving an appropriate diet, and again, we discussed this in more detail in some of these other conversations, giving the appropriate diet, optimizing the health of the gut with the health of the microbiome, using probiotics if we have had antibiotic therapy in the past, optimizing that health is going to go a long way to controlling the immune response to that flea saliva. So I hope that makes sense. So although it's just the flea saliva, and we're not worried about environmental allergies, we're not worried about food allergies. Food has a big role, but also we want to be optimizing the health of the skin as well, so that we have an anti-inflammatory effect. We don't have this defect within the skin. Our fatty acids are incredibly useful here. They have a natural anti-inflammatory effect, and help to modulate the response and help control the excessive inflammation and everything that gets set up there. Topical treatments and even just cooling can help. If you've got a bit of a flare up and it's very short term. And this could be with contact allergies as well. Just using a cold, getting a soaked cold towel or something like that and wrapping your dog in that, has that instant cooling effect, takes the heat away from the skin, reduces that itch, and that can be all you need if you notice that a flare up is happening. The use of I'll go back to the use of medications, which I know is not what a lot of you want to hear, but if we are having a very short-term flare-up of a problem, then actually even just a couple of days of might be antihistamines. Encourage you to go back to Dr. Chip's conversation, to talk that talks about all of those different options. Even just a couple of days of antihistamines or other anti-inflammatory, anti-allergy medication can make all the difference with nipping that inflammation in the blood and reducing the risk of secondary infections and a minor problem progressing to a major one. So I think a lot of what we're talking about with the treatment and management of allergic disease really is the same no matter what allergy your dog is suffering from. Now, there are clearly going to be nuances, and there's going to be different things that are appropriate for one and not the other. If you've got a dog who just has a food allergy, then we don't need to worry so much about what their environment is, and you don't need to worry so much about the tree and the pollen and all that kind of thing, because they're not allergic to that. They're absolutely fine. All of these other strategies are going to be appropriate for no matter what your dog's allergic to. But certainly, with topical, you might find that shampooing as well is going to help with that topical soothing. If it's a very specific area, you might find kind of topical creams and lotions, and there's various different options that are available to you there. And again, we speak about that, I think, with specifically with Dr. Sharice on day 3. So hopefully that gives you some ideas there. Dog is allergic to penicillin. Is there another antibiotic available for dogs? Absolutely. So penicillin, I think we think of allergies to medications, and a common one for us is an allergy, or I say common, one of the more common allergies to medications is to penicillin. Thankfully, it's really not very common for our dogs. So antibiotics. So use of antibiotics is it's really, I guess it's a really interesting field. It's one that we are we're all trying to use antibiotics less and less because we are, as our kind of knowledge of disease and as an immune system and some of the other effects that we can stimulate with the use of antibiotics. As we become aware of that, we are trying to use them less. Also, with the rise of superbugs, so our multi-resistant infections, means that we really need to be very, very mindful that we're using antibiotics appropriately and responsibly, that we're not using where they're really not needed. When it comes to the best antibiotic or the right antibiotic to use, that really depends on what infection we're dealing with, because I guess people often think of antibiotics as being stronger or weaker. One is a strong antibiotic, and whereas this is a weak antibiotic. But excuse me, that's not really the case. Different antibiotics have different, what we call spectrum of activity. So they will act on a specific subset of bacteria, whereas maybe they have no effect on another subset of bacteria. So we can think of them in terms of their spectrum of activity. Now, some antibiotics have a very, what we call a narrow spectrum of activity, meaning they only tackle a very small percentage of the kind of total types of bacteria as a whole. And others we call a broad spectrum antibiotic, which means that they are effective against a really wide range of infection. So I've lost my train of thought there. So another thing that we need to think about with antibiotics is that some of them will act on different parts of the body or penetrate and concentrate in certain parts of the body very effectively, whereas other parts of the body they don't penetrate and they can't access. So yes, there's plenty more options than penicillin, but I guess I can't say to you, well, we should be using this antibiotic or that antibiotic, because it really depends on where that infection is in the body and what that infection is, what actual bacteria is involved. Now, that doesn't mean that we always need to run a culture and sensitivity, so we don't always need to take a sample from that area of infection. Now, a lot of the time that's not possible anyway. But we don't always have to take a sample to send off to the lab to see what they grow, to then see which antibiotic it's sensitive to. Although that is something that we should definitely be doing if we're having problems with controlling infection, to make sure that there isn't a resistant bacteria there. Because like I say, there's this real rise in bacterial resistance. And again, we have this real fantastic conversation with Dr. Sharice Roth about this exact topic. But yeah, we don't always have to do that, because we can often predict, certainly in the first instance of an infection, we can predict what the most likely bacteria involved is and what the best option of antibiotic is as well. It's important, it's clearly going to be important that you let your vet know that your dog does have an allergy to penicillin. I would hope that there'll be a big alert on his file. But if you have to take them to an after hours centre or to a different veterinarian, then make sure that you do mention that, because penicillin is penicillins are a class of antibiotic as well. Just because the drug is a penicillin doesn't mean that it's not going to potentially stimulate an allergic response to a dog with a known penicillin allergy. So other antibiotics in same similar classes can also cause that problem. Cool. So hopefully that answers your question there. Fantastic. So I was just on my kind of the last, Dr. Lisa Chimes, who we're going to be speaking to tomorrow. So Dr. Lisa, she is an Australian veterinarian. For those of you over in Australia, you might have seen her on Bondi Vet on the TV, and we are focusing on grooming techniques for allergic dogs. So how should you think about grooming? And we're talking not just about grooming as a treatment of allergies when there's a flare-up, but also how should we be thinking about grooming and maintaining grooming to help optimize skin health, to help eliminate flare-ups of our allergies. So that's tomorrow. A brief jump into the future as well. Day 3, we're talking about non-antibiotic non-antibiotic use of, but again, non-antibiotic control of skin infections. We're talking about bathing and other topical therapy tips with Dr. Joy Griffin, who, those of you in the States at least, unfortunately it's not available in my part of the world, but you might have seen her on the National Geographic channel in her dedicated show there. I've got a fantastic panel discussion about the use of CBD in allergic dogs. I'd encourage you all to tune in for that. It's really interesting. I've got 3 CBD and cannabis experts, and we talked for quite a long time. It's quite a long discussion, but it's well worth your time. I'm talking about supplements, different supplements for allergies. Some of them are common options there, and we're talking about ozone and microbiome restorative therapy, and then the root cause of allergies and then a functional guide to allergies. So that's on day 3, and then day 4, we'll talk about some of the more unusual manifestations of allergic disease and some other considerations to consider. So that's kind of what's coming up. Thanks for all of your questions today. I'm going to be with you live again tomorrow. Check the time. It's very early morning for me when I'm going live. So whatever time that is, it's going to be, I think, maybe 4 hours earlier than it is now. So whatever time that is for you in your part of the world, hopefully you can join me there, and you can, we can dive into some of the conversations and the questions that be stimulated from tomorrow's presentation. So we've also got a masterclass for you, and it's something that's not been announced, but if you go to vetsummits.com/allergy/masterclass, that is actually a presentation from myself about how you can put a lot of what we're learning in the Allergy Summit into action. talk about kind of the three main issues that are getting in the way of achieving control of your dog's allergies. And I'd definitely encourage you to do that. You can go to that website there, so petsummits.com/allergy/masterclass. If you scroll down to the bottom of the program for today, I believe there is a link that you can click there. So if you can find that there, yeah, and I hope to see you all in that masterclass as well. I really enjoyed putting that together to help you. You know, I guess what I'd encourage all of you to do is, you're going to hear lots of different opinions from lots of different people over the next 4 days. And what I always encourage people, and I guess the message that I preach, is what's right for one individual dog, cat, whatever species you're talking about in my kind of general day-to-day life, but in this case, what's right for one, what is right for one allergic dog is not necessarily right for another allergic dog, for a whole number of reasons, because of the manifestation of the disease, because of the ease of providing a particular treatment, because of your individual philosophy to your pet's treatment, because of the options available to you in your part of the world. There's all, because of your financial situation, there's all kinds of different reasons why what's right for one person is not right for the other, for another person. So you're going to hear lots of different opinions, lots of different treatment options. I'd encourage you to, obviously to take good notes, to get involved with conversations, to ask your questions in other live Q&A sessions. This one, and I'm doing one of these every day of four days of the summit, but to actually take action. So education without action is really just entertainment. That's one quote I love, and I think is really it really hits the nail on the head, because if we're not taking action, then how can we hope to benefit the health of our pet? How can we hope to settle their itch? How can we hope for them to be comfortable, their quality of life to be optimized, and ultimately for them to be as healthy and happy as possible, which is what you want for your dog. It's what I want for your dog. It's what I want for all my patients, whether online or in the flesh. It's for them to live as healthy, happy, and comfortable as life as possible. So I encourage you definitely to come into all of these talks with an open mind. Potentially some of your preconceptions are going to be maybe be challenged, and maybe what you hear isn't right for you, and it's not something that you're interested in exploring. But what you hear in a different conversation, or in the same conversation but taking about things from a slightly different angle, or talking about a slightly different aspect of the disease, pick and choose and take all of those points in mind, and then put it into action. But with that masterclass, hopefully help kind of make it a little bit clearer about how that can, some of the pitfalls as well that I often come across when I'm talking to my patients, or talking to my clients, I should say, dealing with allergic dogs, but also with lots of other long-term conditions as well. So if there's no further questions, then really that's it from me. It's been great to hang out with you for the last kind of 15 minutes or so. Yeah, I can't wait for you to jump into some of the conversations that we're going to be having in days 2, 3, and 4. Maybe going back and checking some of those other conversations and some of the sections, if you've not managed to jump into the presentations that were released on day 1. Remember, they're only available for 48 hours, so definitely jump in and make the most of the huge range of experience and knowledge that my expert guests bring. And until tomorrow, I will sign off. So take good care, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow, whatever time that is for you. You'll get the email and with all the times and everything there. So that's it from me. Take care. Bye now.